bringing Chris Christie's first television release in contract with COVID. Chris, thanks for joining us this morning. First question, 6 days out of the hospital. How do you feel? We're bringing Chris Christie's first television release.
I feel a lot better, George, especially the last 2 or 3 days.
Chris, thanks for joining us this morning. First question, 6 days out of the hospital. How do you feel?
Being able to recover, getting a lot of my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, but I'm about to fight me around.
80%, that's progress.
Recover, getting a lot of my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, but I'm about to fight me around.
80%, that's progress.
Recover, getting a lot of my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, but also about to fight me around. So I received both of those accommodations. I received my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, and also about to fight me around. So I received both of those accommodations. I received my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, and also about to fight me around. So I received both of those accommodations. I received my energy. I feel a lot better, George. I'm not yet 100%, and also about to fight me around. So I received both of those accommodations. I received my energy. I feel a very rare. My doctor
eliminate the root fear in life, which is the fear of death, then all other fears disappear.
Welcome, everybody, to the Jeff Mara podcast. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes or Spotify or something else, I just want to let you know that this podcast is also on YouTube. So you can go to Jeff Mara Podcast on YouTube and check it out. Today's guest is Steven Weber. Steven was in an accident and he ended up being in a coma and had a near-death experience. He has since written a book of his experience called The Place Between Here and There. And today we get to talk to him about his book, his experience, and perhaps some of his insights from his experience. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
Thank you. If you don't mind, can we just start right on the day of your accident and move forward from there?
Very well. I'll explain everything from the very start. Is that it was basically a day like any other day. I was driving out to Eastern Long Island. That's where we live, to go to a barbecue place with my then wife. We were at the end of our relationship. Our children were in high school preparing to go to college. And we were just trying to keep our relationship together. We had gone, as people do. We just drifted apart over the years, and our children were our focus. And so that's what we would do: is we'd go for a ride on my Harley Davidson and go out east and have some burgers or some wings and something, and just have a pleasant afternoon out. And so we had gone to this barbecue place, and on the way out, the traffic was backed up for miles. And so I waited in traffic for a little while, but then people started to go off on the side of the road and make a right at an intersection above, about a half mile down the road. So after a while of sitting there, I finally decided to do the same thing. And just when I was coming up to the intersection, a car made a left-hand turn, a truck, and slammed right into the side of my motorcycle, throwing my wife off the back, and I absorbed the full impact of the truck. Wow. And next thing I knew, I was on my back and I was looking around. It was obvious some time had passed because there were emergency workers all around me, and I wasn't sure what was going on. And but as I tried to move and stuff, I realized I was seriously injured, and this day was going to be like no other day in my life. There was no way of going back. And then the next thing I realized is I was floating up towards the clouds, and I was getting higher and higher. And I knew something terrible had happened. And in my own mind, I was giving up to perhaps I was dying.
If you don't mind me, I hate to interrupt, but so when you were floating up to the clouds, did you look down and see your body and all the action there?
Yes, I did. I saw everything.
And you looked, and did you realize that's me still down there, or you just said, "I wonder what's going"? Well,
I didn't see myself.
You didn't see yourself. Interesting.
No, I didn't see myself at all. But I saw the accident scene. And I saw the pieces of motorcycle all over, and the cars were lined up for miles.
Wow.
And I just kept on rising up and up. And just as I was about to go through the clouds, I started to come back down. And I got closer and closer. And then I realized I was actually in a helicopter. And I was landing at Stony Brook Hospital, one of the best trauma centers in the United States. It's a university hospital. They're miracle workers there. And I was on the tarmac, and they came and got me. And that's the last time I remember being on this earth for what seemed like an eternity. But it was about 3 weeks that I was in the coma. I had catastrophic injuries. My spine was broken, and they had to insert 2 steel rods in my spine to stabilize it. I had a traumatic brain injury. I had a shattered hip. My hip was all in pieces, and they had to pin that back together. Broken arm, broken leg, ribs. But the most serious is I had internal injuries, and I was bleeding inside. And they had to do several operations to stabilize me. Finally, they got me stabilized, And then the next thing is that my foot started to swell and was cutting off the blood. And so I had to do just miraculous surgeries. And then I was in my hospital bed. And but in my mind, I was in a different place, a place that I call between here and there. And it isn't where you go when you die, and it isn't here. It's kind of like an in-between place. And I have to stress is that I was 0 on the spirituality scale prior to this. I was a beer drinking, hot wing eating, motorcycle guy. You know, I was a computer guy, but I lived a life. I've traveled all over the United States, and spirituality just wasn't my thing. I loved motorcycles and I loved Harley Davidsons. I loved partying, and I often say, being a spiritualist guy now, if the guy who I was 10 years ago met Stevie today, he'd beat the crap out of him. Wow. You know, because it was such a change. Wow. But so I'm in my hospital bed, and in my mind, I'm in this other place. And the first place, and it was a place where time didn't exist. And that's a very important concept. And what I mean by that is here time. What is time? Time is the ticking of the clock, the sun rising and falling, appointments in the future, you know, pots boiling on the stove. There's none of that there. What time is measured is by your experience, your spiritual growth. That's the only thing that changes, is that how you see yourself and how you see the people around you. And I'll give you an example.
Before you do that, let me stop you there. I just want to clarify a few things. So when you were going up in the air, you probably weren't out of your body yet. You were just in a helicopter flying to Stony Bridge. And then when you got there, Stony Brook. And when you got there, you were probably already unconscious, I'm assuming. And you were just out and already comatose, or did they have to induce you into a coma, or you were already comatose?
I was dying. I was out. I was dying. They, I was in a very, very bad state. In fact, in any other place on the planet, I would have been dead.
Right.
There's no doubt. Just the fact that they were able to land the helicopter in a schoolyard, and it was just a flight away, that this trauma surgeon was on duty, everything had to happen.
Right. And so your last probably conscious memory of being on the planet was just in the helicopter ride.
Yes, it was.
And then your next memory, or when after all this experience is over, is when you came back, and that's your next conscious memory of being back here. Correct?
Yes, but it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
Because that when I was in the other place, I didn't know I was any place else, because the first place was deeply rooted in my experience here on Earth. Okay. I didn't know anything happened, although I should have known. The first place was a work-like setting, and there were many people there from my life. But the first things I noticed is that some people I hadn't seen in years, but they were just as I remember them. Some people I saw just yesterday, and they were all in that environment. And what I was doing is I was helping them with their computers. But over time, as I realized, is that it had nothing to do with computers. And that was teaching me more about the duality of life, how everything in life has its meaning, but there's always a deeper meaning behind things. And so, like in this instance, is that I began to see people that I knew as older people. I started to see them as young people. And then I was beginning to recognize them. I might have saw a young person as an old person. And then I was beginning to recognize them still. And so then I started to see a man as a woman.
Wow. Not
as anything else but a true bio woman. And I saw the same thing as a man, as a woman as a man. And so I was seeing all these different people in different shapes and forms. And what I was being able to taught to see is the spirit inside everybody, that part of you which doesn't change. And by seeing people that I knew in different forms, I was beginning to see what part of them is that part of you that goes on forever. You know, you have a different body. You have you're not a boy, you're not a girl, you're not a father, you're not a son, you are a spirit. And that was the first thing as I learned in that space. I learned to recognize the spirit in everybody and everything.
All right. So these people that you were seeing, were they dead or were they still living on Earth? And two, were these experiences, or were you doing a life review, or were these new experiences with these people?
All awesome questions. I'm glad you asked them. Okay. At this point, I saw nobody who was dead. Everybody was alive in my life, at least all that I knew. Some of these people I haven't seen in years, but no, they were all alive people who were in my life. And I was being shown how to see the spirit in them. And so I had a life review, but first I had to have my awareness raised. And so the first thing as I was taught is to recognize spirit. And then the next thing is that I began to see spirit in everything. Once I was able to feel the spirit in people, I began to feel the spirit in animals, in the stars, in the sky. Everything about us has a spirit. And it's just a core principle of life is that we are all connected in a real way. And so first I was taught the spirit, and the next things I was taught is that everything has a spirit. And then finally I was taught that we all are like cells in a body. We all, just like your cells in your body make up you, and there's a consciousness of you. All of us make up a consciousness, and that's the consciousness of the Creator. The Creator and the creation are one. We are all part of the same universe. There is not two. The people, all of us, we all are part of the Creator themselves. And that's who we are, and that's our destiny here on earth. Our destiny is to learn and to grow, and to have, through that awareness, is to have spiritual evolution. And as we evolve as spirit, the whole universe, the whole world, everything we know evolves as well. The universe, the Creator, and the creation are one. So in this place, those are the first lessons I learned. I term this as being taught the language of the universe. And it's kind of like a way of understanding. And once I learned this language of the universe, then I went through this life review.
Yeah, it's interesting. Initially it makes me wonder, as some people talk about the multiverse theory and, there's infinite universes, and, you and I may be best friends in another universe, and in another universe we may hate each other or whatever, so this in-between place kind of makes me think, okay, what, maybe he was in like a, or maybe the in-between in general is kind of like a different multiverse plane of existence. And two, I'd like to know what you think about that. And two, besides interacting with people did you interact with a godlike being and or angels?
Okay, so the first question is that, no, I didn't feel it was like a multiverse. What I felt like I guess Catholics call it purgatory, but as Catholics learned about purgatory was a place of punishment. No, I think what this place is getting you ready, it's getting ready for you to die and to pass and to go on to the next stage of your spiritual evolution. Many times people think about is heaven or being reincarnated. It was to prepare you. And I was on the verge of life and death for three weeks. It was touch and go. There were so many instances where I just eat through as a person, as a human being. And so I was really on that edge of life and death. And so in the way that things work is that I was being prepared to die. And so I was being taught the lessons that I was going to have to learn to be in spirit form, either be reincarnated to have another earthly experience or to go into spirit world. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, more in detail. But that's what I was being prepared for. And then your second question, what was that?
While you were there, And gosh, I have so many questions. But first of all, while you were there, did you speak with the creator or any angelic beings or somebody giving you direction? You know, like, was there some mentor, spiritual being giving you direction, or were you kind of just all on your own, learning these lessons on your own?
Okay. So the short answer is yes, and that's later on. I need to explain a couple of things in order for that to make sense, because you could talk about these spiritual things and it'll sound like gobbledygook unless you put it into the right framework, and really, because all this was new to me, and I really had to be brought from one step to another. And so the first step in this place was to learn the spirituality, the language of the universe, how things are connected, or that your teacher, as I was learning these things, the most important teacher is inside of you. Actually, from your own experiences, that's the way you grow through your awareness. And so the next phase was through the life review, where I relived my life. And so I would relive my life with my understanding of my new spirituality, my understanding, and plus living it for the second time. I had new insights into my experiences. And so then when I was done with my life review, I felt so much better. I felt like all of a sudden, a lot of things that happened to me in my life, I wasn't upset about anymore. Mm-hmm. And the happy things were still happy, but I started to have no shame, no regret, no animosity towards anybody. Mm-hmm. I began to feel at peace because the things that happened to me made sense then. And then what happened is I went and had another life review, and I'd go through the life review. And then at the end, I grew spiritually each time, and I became more aware, and I became more blissful. People often ask me, were there pretty colors and other things? Other people experience that. I did not experience that. What I experienced was beautiful bliss based upon my awareness growing. And all of a sudden, think how you would feel if you weren't never worried about anything. If you didn't have any bitterness towards anybody, or no one had bitterness towards you, all of a sudden, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And so I went through that life review. I couldn't tell you how many times, but what drove the process wasn't a consciousness beyond myself or beyond us driving the process. Mm-hmm. It was the need. As long as I kept on learning from this life review, I would keep on going through it. And this went on for what seemed like forever. And every time I started it, I knew that I would be better by the